Please. That was the word Ember heard in her mind the moment she touched them. Not spoken aloud by the dying twins wrapped in silk and snow. Not from the Alpha King who ruled the Northern Territories with an iron fist. But from something deeper, older, written in the language of fate itself. Ember Forbes had been invisible her entire life. The weakest Omega in Shadowfrost Pack. A creature so far beneath notice that even the kitchen servants used her name as a curse. She'd learned to survive by becoming a ghost, to scrub blood from stone floors, to carry scalding pots with blistered hands, and to believe the lie whispered in every corner of the packhouse, that Omegas like her deserved nothing better than the scraps thrown to dogs. Then 2 infants appeared in her path during a midnight storm. Abandoned in a snowdrift. Blue-lipped and freezing. Dying. And Ember did what no one had ever done for her. She refused to look away. Hit subscribe. Please don't look away, be like Ember. Ember thought she was saving the twins. She had no idea they were saving her right back. The kitchen stones were always cold, even in summer. Ember's knees had long since stopped bruising from the hours spent kneeling on them, scrubbing at blood and grease that never fully disappeared. The packhouse consumed meat like a furnace consumed wood, and someone had to clean up after the feast. That someone was always her. Move faster, you useless creature. Marga's voice cut through the steam rising from the washing basin. The head Omega stood with her arms crossed, her broad frame blocking the warmth from the cooking fire. She'd been beautiful once, before bitterness carved lines around her mouth. Now she ruled the kitchen with the same casual cruelty she'd learned from the alphas above. The beta's dinner service won't clean itself. Ember kept her eyes down and scrubbed harder. Speaking back only earned more work, or worse, a night locked in the cold storage cellar where the meat hung on hooks and her breath turned to frost. She'd learned years ago that silence was survival. Look at me when I'm speaking to you. Ember's hands stilled. Slowly, she lifted her gaze just high enough to see Marga's boots, worn leather reinforced with iron clips that left dents in the floor when she walked. Never higher. Eye contact was for wolves with rank. Marga's laugh was sharp as broken glass. That's what I thought. You know what you are, don't you? Furniture. Something we use and forget. The only reason you're still here is because someone has to do the work even the rats won't touch. The other kitchen Omegas, Sarah and Old Finch, said nothing. They never did. Speaking up for someone weaker only painted a target on your own back. Ember had learned that lesson too, watching others defend her only to end up scrubbing beside her the next day. The Alpha's hunting party returns at dawn, Marga continued, dumping a basket of mud-caked boots at Ember's feet. These need to be spotless by then. And when you're finished, the fireplaces in the upper halls need ash removed. She leaned down, her breath hot against Ember's ear. Sleep is for wolves who matter. Ember waited until Marga's footsteps faded up the servants' stairs before allowing herself a single, shaking breath. Her fingers ached. Her back screamed. But she reached for the first boot and began to scrub. This was her life. This was all it would ever be. At least, that's what she believed until the storm came. The blizzard hit just after midnight, howling through the packhouse like a living thing. Ember had been sent to dump kitchen scraps at the forest edge when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the wind's shriek. A cry. Weak and fading, but unmistakably there. She should have walked away. Omegas who wandered off task ended up as examples. But her feet moved before her mind could stop them, following that desperate sound into the white-dark chaos of snow and ice. The bundle was half buried in a drift, wrapped in silk far too fine for this wilderness. Ember's frozen fingers pulled back the fabric and her heart stopped. 2 infants, their lips blue, their tiny chests barely moving. Someone had left them here to die. She didn't think. She scooped them against her chest, tucking them inside her threadbare cloak, trying to share the meager warmth of her own body. Their skin was ice against hers. Please, she whispered to gods she'd stopped believing in. Please don't let them die. The moment she spoke, fire exploded across her wrist. Ember screamed, nearly dropping the babies as agony lanced up her arm. Golden black symbols erupted across her skin, twisting and burning like living brands. Ancient letters she couldn't read, geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. The mark spread from her wrist to her forearm, glowing so bright it turned the snowfall into a shower of sparks. The Alpha King's mate bond. She'd heard the legends whispered in the kitchen, the mark that appeared only once in a generation, binding a wolf to the most powerful alpha alive. It was supposed to be a myth. The babies stirred against her chest, their breathing steadying as warmth from the mark spread through her body and into theirs. They were connected now. All three of them. There. I see light. Patrol wolves materialized from the storm, three massive shapes in shadowfrost gray. The lead wolf shifted midstride, his human form towering over her, naked and furious in the cold. Ember recognized him, Garrett, the beta's second. A wolf who'd stepped on her fingers once because she'd been too slow moving out of his path. What are you doing out here, Omega? His eyes dropped to the glowing mark on her arm and his expression shifted from anger to shock to something darker. Greed. What the fuck is that? Ember clutched the twins tighter. They needed help. Those aren't pack babies. Garrett moved closer, and the other two patrol wolves fanned out, circling her. That's Northern Silk. And that mark, that's not possible. Not on something like you. Stay back. The words came out stronger than she'd ever spoken before. Garrett laughed, a sound like breaking branches. You're giving me orders? Your furniture, Omega. Hand over whatever you stole and maybe I won't. He reached for the babies. Ember's wolf surged forward, that weak, pathetic creature she'd always been ashamed of, and for the first time in her life, she felt it snarl with purpose. No. The mark flared brighter. Garrett's hand stopped inches from the silk bundle, his face contorting as invisible force pushed back against him. The other wolves froze, their eyes wide with something Ember had never seen directed at her before. Fear. You can't have them, Ember said, her voice steady despite her shaking legs. The twins made small sounds against her chest, alive and warming. They're under my protection now. Garrett stared at the glowing symbols crawling up her arm, at the Omega who'd never once raised her eyes, now meeting his gaze with something that looked like defiance. We're taking you to the Alpha King, he finally said. All three of you. And God's help you if you just made the biggest mistake of your worthless life. The king's hall stretched impossibly high, all black stone and silver torches that burned with cold fire. Ember had never been this deep into the packhouse. Omegas didn't walk these floors, they crawled through servant passages hidden in the walls, invisible as shadows. Now she stood in the center of the grand chamber, still clutching the twins, while wolves in expensive furs whispered and stared. The mark on her arm hadn't stopped glowing. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, warm despite the ice still clinging to her threadbare cloak. Kneel before the Alpha King. Garrett's hand pressed against her shoulder, forcing her down. Ember's knees hit stone, but she kept the babies elevated, protected. She could feel their tiny hearts beating against her chest, steady now, alive. That was all that mattered. Look at me. The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chamber like a blade through silk. Every wolf fell silent. Every head bowed except Ember's, which lifted slowly, inevitably, drawn by a command that bypassed her will entirely. Alpha King Isaac Vane sat on a throne carved from a single massive tree, his presence so overwhelming that Ember's wolf immediately tried to submit. But something in the mark, that burning brand on her arm, kept her spine straight, kept her eyes from dropping even as instinct screamed at her to prostrate herself. He was younger than she'd imagined. 30, perhaps, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes like frozen silver. Scars traced his jaw and neck, the kind earned in battle, not ceremony. His power filled the room like pressure before a lightning strike, making it hard to breathe. Those silver eyes fixed on the glowing symbols crawling up Ember's arm, and something flickered across his face. Shock. Recognition. And then something that looked almost like pain. Where did you find them? His voice was carefully controlled, but Ember heard the razor's edge beneath it. In the snow. By the northern ridge. They were dying. Bring them here. Ember's arms tightened instinctively around the silk bundle. The mark flared hotter, protective. They're safe with me. A collective gasp rippled through the watching wolves. Garrett moved forward, murder in his eyes, But Isaac raised one hand and the beta froze mid-step. "Safe with you," Isaac repeated slowly, rising from his throne. He descended the steps with predatory grace, each movement precise and deadly. "Do you know who I am, Omega?" "Yes." Ember's voice didn't shake. The mark wouldn't let it. "Do you know what you're carrying?" "Babies. Children who needed help." Isaac stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could smell winter pine and smoke on him. Close enough to see the muscle ticking in his jaw. "Those babies are my heirs. My son and daughter. They were stolen from the royal nursery 3 days ago by wolves I trusted." His eyes dropped to the mark blazing on her skin. "And somehow, an Omega from a border pack found them when my best trackers couldn't." The twins stirred at the sound of his voice, making small sounds. One tiny hand escaped the silk wrapping, reaching toward him. Isaac's expression cracked, just for a moment. He reached out with one scarred hand, letting the infant's fingers wrap around his. "Kale," he whispered. Then louder, "Healer. Now." An elderly woman in white robes rushed forward, but when she tried to take the babies, Ember's body moved on pure instinct. She turned away, shielding them with her own frame. "I need to examine them," the healer said gently. "Please, child. Let me make sure they're unharmed." "Ember." Isaac's voice was different now, softer but no less commanding. "That mark on your arm means they're as much yours as mine now. But they need to be checked. Will you trust me?" She wanted to refuse. Every lesson she'd learned about trusting alphas screamed at her to run. But she looked at his face, at the genuine fear for the children there, and slowly, carefully, she allowed the healer to take them. The moment the babies left her arms, the mark flared so bright it cast shadows across the entire hall. Ember gasped as the bond stretched like a living thing, connecting her to the infants even across the distance. She could feel them breathing. Feel their confusion and cold receding as the healer wrapped them in warm blankets. "Impossible," someone whispered. Isaac was staring at her arm, at the complete, perfect mate mark that had appeared on the most unlikely wolf in the Northern Territories. "It's real," he said, and she couldn't tell if he was relieved or horrified. "The bond is real." "What does that mean?" Ember's voice came out smaller than she intended. Isaac met her eyes, and in them she saw the weight of a kingdom, the loss of wolves he'd trusted, and something else. Something that looked like recognition. Like he'd been waiting for this moment even as he dreaded it. "It means, Ember," he said quietly, "that you and I are bound for life. And nothing, not war, not blood, not all the wolves in this kingdom, can break what fate has written on your skin." They gave her a room 3 doors down from the royal nursery. Not the servant quarters she'd expected, but an actual chamber with a bed that didn't smell like mildew and windows that overlooked the northern mountains. Ember had stood in the doorway for 10 minutes before she could make herself step inside, convinced someone would realize the mistake and drag her back to the kitchen. But the bond wouldn't let her rest. Even through stone walls, she could feel Kale and Luna. The twins had names now, names that Isaac had whispered like prayers, breathing in their cradles. The mark on her arm pulsed in time with their heartbeats, a constant reminder that she was connected to them in ways she didn't fully understand. 3 days passed in a strange haze. The healer declared the twins healthy but monitored them constantly. Isaac moved through the pack house like a storm about to break, interrogating guards and advisors, hunting for whoever had stolen his children. And Ember sat in the nursery, holding babies who reached for her with tiny fingers, while wolves who used to ignore her existence now watched her like she was a puzzle that might explode. The attack came on the 4th night. Ember woke to the sound of breaking glass and the acrid smell of smoke. The bond screamed in her chest, primal and terrified. The twins. Someone was in the nursery. She ran barefoot into the hallway, her weak wolf surging forward with strength she'd never possessed before. The nursery door hung open, splintered at the hinges. Inside, 2 wolves in black moved toward the cradles with knives that gleamed silver, the kind of silver that could kill even the strongest alpha. Ember didn't think. She shifted mid-leap, her small grey wolf crashing into the first attacker with more force than her size should have allowed. The bond was burning through her, lending her power, turning desperation into something that felt almost like strength. The wolf turned, surprised that anyone would challenge him, and backhanded her hard enough to send her sprawling. Her head cracked against the stone floor. Stars exploded across her vision. Just a fucking Omega, he laughed, turning back to the cradles. Kill her after. Ember tasted blood. The mark on her arm, still visible even in her wolf form, blazed white-hot. She could hear Kale and Luna crying, terrified and vulnerable. The bond wouldn't let her stay down. It wouldn't let her fail. She launched herself at the second attacker as he reached for Luna, teeth finding his wrist. He screamed and slashed with the silver blade. Fire raced across Ember's shoulder as the metal cut deep, but she held on, dragging him away from the cradle with every ounce of strength the bond gave her. The door exploded inward. Isaac, in full wolf form, massive and black as midnight, tore into the room with a roar that shook the walls. His jaws closed around the first attacker's throat, crushing spine and windpipe in one brutal snap. The second tried to run, but Isaac was faster, bringing him down before he reached the window. Guards flooded in behind him, securing the room, but Isaac shifted back to human form and went straight to the cradles. His hands shook as he lifted each twin, checking for injuries that weren't there because Ember had stopped the attackers before they could reach them. Only then did he turn to where Ember lay crumpled against the wall, blood spreading across the nursery floor from the gash in her shoulder. The silver was burning, poisoning her slowly. Healer. Isaac's voice cracked with something that sounded like fear. He knelt beside her, still holding Luna in one arm. Ember, look at me. Stay awake. She tried to speak, but darkness was pulling at her. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the mark on her arm still glowing, still connecting her to the twins she'd saved, and Isaac's silver eyes above her, wide with an emotion she couldn't name. Ember woke to pain and the smell of winter herbs. The silver wound in her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, a dull fire that no amount of the healer's salves could fully extinguish. But the bond was still there, steady and strong, telling her the twins were safe. That was enough. You shouldn't have survived that. The voice came from the corner of her room where an old man sat in shadow, his frame bent with age but his eyes sharp as broken glass. Ember tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, gasping as the wound pulled. Don't move, child. The silver's still working its way out. He leaned forward into the lamplight, and Ember recognized him from the kitchen. The ancient wolf who sometimes came for tea and honey, who the servants whispered had been alive since before the Great Wars. Don, the pack historian. 3 days you've been sleeping. 3 days the king has been standing guard outside your door like you're the precious thing and not his children. The twins are fine, healthy, asking for you in the way babies do. Don's weathered hands folded over a leather-bound book in his lap. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because of what you did. Because of what you are. Ember's fingers drifted to the mark on her arm, still visible beneath the bandages. I don't understand any of this. The bond, the strength. I'm just an Omega. The weakest. You are not weak. Don's voice cracked like thunder. And you were never just an Omega. Your mother made sure of that. The room seemed to tilt. My mother left me at the pack house door when I was 3. She didn't want me. Your mother saved you. Dawn opened the book, revealing pages covered in faded script and illustrations of wolves wreathed in silver light. Your mother was Lyanna Moonwhisper, last daughter of the Silver Moon bloodline. One of the oldest, most powerful families to ever walk these territories. He traced a genealogy chart that branched like tree roots. They were thought extinct after the purge 60 years ago, when jealous alphas hunted them down for possessing magic that rivaled the strongest kings. Ember stared at the pages, at names written in silver ink that seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight. That's impossible. I can't even shift properly. I'm suppressed. Dawn's finger stopped on a name at the bottom of the chart. Lyanna. And beneath it, in fresh ink, Ember. Your mother bound your power when you were a child, hid it so deep even you didn't know it existed. She left you at Shadowfrost because it was the one pack so brutal, so dismissive of Omegas, that no one would ever look twice at you. No one would ever suspect what you really were. But why? Ember's voice broke. Why would she do that to me? Because they were still hunting. The wolves who killed her family, who believed Silver Moon blood was too dangerous to exist. Dawn closed the book gently. She died protecting your secret. Died making sure you'd survive long enough to find your purpose. The mark on Ember's arm pulsed, warm and insistent. The twins. The bond knew. The bond always knows. Dawn stood, bones creaking. Alpha King Isaac's line descends from the old northern kings, and your line from the Silver Moon shamans. Your ancestors were meant to stand together, to balance power with wisdom. The mark appeared because fate recognized what you are, not an Omega, but a queen in hiding. Ember looked at her hands, the same hands that had scrubbed floors and been stepped on, that had held dying babies and fought off attackers with impossible strength. I don't know how to be what you're saying. You already are. Dawn moved toward the door, then paused. The silver should have killed you. The blade was coated with enough poison to drop a full alpha. But your blood burned it away because Silver Moon wolves are immune to the very metal named for them. Your body remembered what your mind forgot. He opened the door to reveal Isaac standing in the hallway, still in the same clothes from 3 days ago, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, recognition, understanding, the weight of a bond that was so much more than either of them had realized. There's more, Dawn said quietly. The wolves who attacked, we found their mark. The Eclipse Syndicate. They've been hunting Silver Moon descendants for decades, and they know what she is now. What you found. He looked at Isaac with something like pity. They won't stop until she's dead and your heirs with her. This isn't over, Alpha King. It's barely begun. The dreams started the night Dawn told her the truth. Ember would close her eyes and find herself standing in a forest she'd never seen, where the trees grew so thick their branches wove together like a cage. Silver moonlight filtered through the canopy, but it was wrong, tainted somehow, turning the snow beneath her feet the color of old blood. A voice spoke from the shadows. Deep. Familiar in a way that made her wolf bare its teeth. The Silver Moon line ends with you, little Omega. A figure stepped into the corrupted moonlight, and Ember's breath caught. Alpha Kalen. She knew him from the few times he'd visited Shadowfrost, a powerful alpha from the eastern packs who'd always smiled too much, whose eyes had lingered on the servants in ways that made them flinch. Isaac called him friend. Called him brother. But in the dream, Kalen's smile was a knife. You think that mark makes you special? You think it makes you safe? He moved closer, and Ember realized she couldn't run, couldn't shift, couldn't do anything but watch. The king's mate bond is the final piece. When your blood spills on sacred ground, when the last silver moon descends, the old magic breaks. And wolves like me, wolves who've been kneeling to kings for too long, we finally take what we deserve. Behind him, more figures emerged from the trees. Dozens of them, all wearing the same symbol burned into their armor, a black sun eclipsing a moon. The Eclipse Syndicate. And at the center, wrapped in silk and crying, Kale and Luna. No. Ember lunged forward, but Kalen's hand shot out, gripping her throat. You already know how this ends, he whispered. You've always known. Why else would your mother run? Why else would she hide you among the broken and forgotten? His fingers tightened. But you can't hide anymore. The mark betrayed you. And when I'm done, there won't be enough left of you to bury. Ember woke screaming. Isaac was through the door before the sound finished echoing, silver eyes wild, power radiating off him in waves. What happened? She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The dream clung to her like oil, suffocating and real in a way normal nightmares never were. The mark on her arm was burning, not with warmth but with warning. Ember. Isaac knelt beside the bed, his hands hovering near her shoulders, careful not to touch without permission. Talk to me. Kalen. The name tasted like poison. Alpha Kalen. He leads them. The Eclipse Syndicate. She looked up at Isaac and saw the exact moment understanding crashed into him. Saw denial war with terrible, dawning certainty. No. Kalen's been my ally for 15 years. He helped me build this kingdom. He wants to destroy it. Ember grabbed Isaac's wrist, desperate to make him believe. I saw him. Not like a regular dream. I saw him, Isaac. Through something else. Through the bloodline Dawn talked about. The mark pulsed hot enough to make them both flinch. He's going to use the twins. Use me, he said. When my blood spills on sacred ground, the old magic breaks. Isaac's jaw clenched so hard she heard teeth grinding. Silver Moon descendants were prophetic. Seers. He stared at her arm, at the bond that connected them. Gods. You're not just immune to silver. You can see. I don't know what I can do. I just know he's coming. Ember's voice dropped to a whisper. And he's already inside your walls. The door opened. Garrett stepped in, and behind him, Ember's heart stopped. Alpha Kaelin himself, all easy smiles and concerned eyes. Heard screaming, Kaelin said smoothly. Is the little Omega all right? Poor thing, still recovering from that nasty silver wound. His gaze met Ember's, and for just a fraction of a second, his smile turned into something cold and knowing. The mark on her arm flared white-hot. And Ember knew without doubt that her prophetic dream had just walked through the door. The air in the room turned to ice. Ember couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at Kaelin standing in her doorway like he belonged there. The mark on her arm screamed warnings through every nerve in her body, the bond recognizing threat the way prey recognizes a predator's shadow. Isaac rose slowly, positioning himself between Ember and Kaelin with the fluid grace of a wolf who'd fought 1,000 battles. She's fine. Just a nightmare from the silver poisoning. Of course. Kaelin's smile never wavered, but his eyes, gods, his eyes were exactly like they'd been in the dream. Empty. Hungry. Silver does terrible things to the mind. Makes you see conspiracies where there are none. He took a step into the room, and Ember felt the bond surge, felt power she didn't understand coiling in her chest like a living thing. That's close enough. Isaac's voice dropped to something dark and dangerous. Kaelin stopped, holding up his hands in mock surrender. Easy, brother. I'm only concerned for your mate. Word travels fast through the pack. A Silver Moon descendant, imagine that. And bonded to you of all wolves. His gaze slid to Ember, sharp as broken glass. Tell me, little Omega, how does it feel to suddenly matter? The words hit like a physical blow because they were designed to. Designed to remind her of what she'd been, what she'd believed about herself for so long. Furniture. Invisible. Nothing. But Ember had held dying babies in her arms and felt fate rewrite itself. Had fought off attackers with strength that shouldn't exist. Had survived silver that should have killed her. She met Kaelin's eyes and didn't look away. It feels, she said quietly, like I can finally see clearly. Something flickered across Kaelin's face. Understanding. Confirmation. And then it was gone, buried beneath that practiced smile. Well, I'm glad you're recovering. Isaac, when you have a moment, there are matters of security we need to discuss. After the attack on the nursery, I've taken the liberty of doubling the guard rotations. No. Isaac's voice cut like a blade. You're dismissed, Kaelin. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Kaelin's smile tightened at the edges. Dismissed? Isaac, I'm trying to help. I said you're dismissed. Isaac moved forward, and his power rolled out like thunder before lightning. Now. For a long moment, Kaelin didn't move. The mask of friendly concern slipped just enough for Ember to see the fury beneath. The rage of a wolf who'd been playing a long game and just realized his opponent had finally figured out the rules. As you wish, Alpha King. Kaelin's voice was silk over steel. He turned to leave, then paused at the door, looking back at Ember. Sweet dreams, little Omega. I hope the nightmares don't return. It wasn't a wish. It was a promise. The moment the door closed, Isaac spun to face Garrett, who'd been standing silent witness to the entire exchange. Find Dawn. Find the captain of the guard. Tell them to meet me in the war room in 10 minutes. His silver eyes were blazing. And tell them to trust no one who's been in contact with Kaelin in the last month. Garrett's face had gone pale, but he nodded and disappeared. Isaac turned back to Ember, and she saw the weight of betrayal settling onto his shoulders like armor. 15 years, he said quietly. I've trusted him for 15 years. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. Don't be. Isaac crossed to her, kneeling beside the bed so they were eye level. Your gift just saved my children. Saved this kingdom. He took her hand carefully, mindful of her injuries. But Ember, if you're right, if Kaelin is Eclipse, then we're already at war. And he knows you can see him. The mark pulsed between them, warm and insistent. Then we need to move first, Ember said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Before he realizes we know. Isaac's expression shifted into something fierce and grateful. You're not furniture anymore, are you? Ember thought of her mother, who'd died protecting a secret. Of the twins who'd chosen her before anyone else had. Of the power sleeping in her blood, waiting to wake. No, she said. I'm not. The Eclipse Syndicate's stronghold wasn't hidden in some distant territory. It was beneath them. Literally beneath the packhouse, in a network of caves that had been there for centuries, carved by wolves who'd plotted rebellion long before Kaelin had drawn his first breath. Dawn had known about the caves. Every historian did. But no one had suspected they were being used, that dozens of wolves had been meeting there for years, planning the downfall of the Silver Moon bloodline and the king who protected them. Ember stood at the cave entrance with Isaac and 30 of his most trusted warriors, feeling the bond stretch painfully in her chest. The twins were safe in the nursery, guarded by wolves whose loyalty had been verified 3 times over. But leaving them had been like tearing off her own skin. You don't have to come. Isaac checked his weapons for the 4th time, silver daggers and iron chains that could hold even the strongest wolf. You're still healing. I'm coming. Ember's voice left no room for argument. The mark on her arm glowed faintly in the darkness, responding to something deep in the caves. He wants me. If I'm not there, he'll run. Isaac's jaw tightened, but he nodded. They both knew she was right. The caves descended in a spiral, twisting deeper into the mountain's heart. Torches lined the walls, burning with that same corrupted light Ember had seen in her vision. The air smelled like old blood and something worse, dark magic, the kind that required sacrifice. They found the central chamber at the bottom of the spiral. It was massive, carved from black stone, with symbols etched into every surface. The eclipse mark dominated the far wall, 10 feet tall and glowing with sickly purple light. And beneath it, chained to posts driven into the stone floor, were wolves. Ember's heart stopped. She recognized them. Kitchen workers from Shadowfrost. The seamstress who'd once slipped her extra bread. Old Finch, who'd never said a kind word but had never been cruel either. A dozen wolves who'd done nothing except exist in the wrong place at the wrong time. Welcome, Alpha King. Kaelin emerged from the shadows, still wearing his perfect smile. He'd abandoned his fine clothes for armor marked with the eclipse symbol, and his eyes held none of the false warmth they'd carried before. This was the real wolf, the one who'd been hiding for 15 years. And you brought my prize. How thoughtful. Isaac's warriors fanned out, surrounding the chamber, but Kaelin didn't look concerned. He snapped his fingers, and dozens of eclipse wolves materialized from hidden passages, outnumbering Isaac's forces 2 to 1. All of them armed with silver. Here's how this works, Kaelin said conversationally, walking between the chained hostages. The Omega comes with me. Willingly. Quietly. And these innocent wolves go free. He stopped beside Finch, resting a silver blade against the old wolf's throat. Or I start carving, and we see how many die before you realize you've already lost. Touch them and you're dead. Isaac's power filled the chamber, making the torches flicker. Am I? Kaelin's smile widened. You're outnumbered. Outmaneuvered. And even if you win this fight, how many of your own people die in the process? He pressed the blade harder, drawing a thin line of blood. How many innocent wolves are worth 1 Silver Moon descendant? Ember felt the bond screaming at her to run, to fight, to do anything except what she was about to do. But she looked at the hostages, at their terrified faces, at Finch who was trying so hard to be brave, and she knew there was only one choice. I'll go. No. Isaac grabbed her arm, his grip desperate. Ember, We can find another way. There is no other way. She met his silver eyes, trying to memorize them because she might not get another chance. This is what silver moon wolves do. We protect. We sacrifice. We stand between the darkness and the ones who can't defend themselves. She touched his face gently. That's what my mother did for me. It's what I'm doing now. He'll kill you. Isaac's voice broke on the words. Maybe. Ember pulled away from him, from the warmth and safety he represented, and walked toward Kaelin. But he won't get the twins. And he won't get you. That's enough. The mark on her arm burned so hot she thought it might scar deeper, the bond trying to physically hold her back. But Ember had spent her entire life being invisible, being nothing. For once, she was going to matter. For once, her choice would save lives instead of scrubbing away the evidence of them. She stopped in front of Kaelin, lifting her chin. Let them go. Kaelin studied her like she was a puzzle he was enjoying solving. You know I'm going to bleed you on sacred ground. That your death breaks the protection your bloodline cast over the northern territories. That once you're gone, nothing stops us from taking the throne. I know. Ember's voice didn't shake. Let them go anyway. For a moment, Kaelin looked almost impressed. Then he gestured, and his wolves began releasing the hostages, cutting chains and shoving terrified pack members toward Isaac's warriors. There, Kaelin said, grabbing Ember's wrist where the mark blazed. His touch felt like poison, wrong in every way that mattered. Everyone's saved. What a hero you are, little Omega. He dragged her toward a passage that led even deeper into the mountain. Now let's see how heroic you feel when the silver starts cutting. Ember looked back once, catching Isaac's eyes across the chamber. She saw fury there and grief, and something that looked like a promise. Then Kaelin pulled her into darkness, and the last thing she heard was Isaac roaring her name. The sacred ground was a cathedral of stone deep in the mountain's heart, where ancient wolves had once worshipped the moon before the purge had turned temples into tombs. Kaelin dragged Ember to the center of a circular platform carved with symbols that made her eyes hurt to look at, where the eclipse mark had been burned so deep into the rock it glowed like a wound. Your mother died screaming on this exact spot, Kaelin said conversationally, chaining Ember's wrists to iron posts. Did Dawn tell you that part? How we hunted her down after she left you at Shadowfrost. How she begged us to believe you died with her. He laughed, the sound echoing off stone. We almost did. But then you had to go and find those royal brats. Had to let the mate mark appear for everyone to see. Ember tested the chains, but they held firm. Around the platform, 24 eclipse wolves formed a circle, chanting in a language she didn't recognize. The dark magic in the air grew thicker, pressing down on her lungs like water. The ritual is simple, Kaelin continued, drawing a silver blade from his belt. Your blood spills on sacred ground where your ancestors cast their protection. The old magic recognizes the sacrifice and breaks. And the northern territories become ours for the taking. He knelt beside her, pressing the blade against her throat. Any last words, little Omega? Ember closed her eyes, feeling the bond stretch across the distance to where the twins slept safely. Feeling Isaac somewhere above, fighting his way down through eclipse wolves to reach her. She could sense his desperation, his fury, his absolute refusal to let her go. But she could feel something else too. Something deeper. A power that had been sleeping in her blood since the day her mother had bound it, waiting for the moment when it would be needed most. Yes, Ember whispered, opening her eyes. They were glowing silver, bright enough to make Kaelin flinch back. I'm done being invisible. The mark on her arm exploded with light. Not the golden black of the mate bond, but pure silver that burned like a star. The chains holding her shattered, iron melting like wax. Ember rose to her feet as power flooded through her. Every generation of silver moon wolves who'd been murdered, every ancestor who'd sacrificed themselves to protect the innocent, every drop of magic her mother had hidden inside her suddenly awakening all at once. Impossible, Kaelin started, but Ember raised her hand and he went flying backward, slamming into the cave wall hard enough to crack stone. The eclipse wolves broke their circle, rushing at her with silver weapons raised. Ember didn't run. She stood her ground and let the power out, a wave of silver light that exploded from her body like a shockwave. It hit the corrupted eclipse mark on the floor, and the dark magic shattered, screaming as it died. The wolves attacking her were thrown back, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. The Silver Moon bloodline doesn't break, Ember said, her voice layered with the voices of every wolf who'd come before her. It endures. It protects. And it will not let you win. Kalen struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. You think this changes anything? There are hundreds of us. And there's one of me. Ember's hands blazed with silver fire. That's all it takes. She could feel the sacred ground responding to her now, recognizing her blood, her power, her right to stand where her ancestors had stood. The protection her mother had died maintaining wasn't breaking. It was renewing, stronger than ever, anchored to Ember instead of to a ritual that could be corrupted. The cave entrance exploded inward. Isaac burst through in full wolf form, massive and furious, with his warriors flooding in behind him. He shifted mid-leap, landing beside Ember in human form, taking in her glowing eyes and the silver light radiating from her skin. I had it handled, Ember said, managing a weak smile despite the power burning through her. Isaac stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. I can see that. Kalen laughed, the sound broken and manic. It doesn't matter. Kill me, kill all of us. There will always be more who want what you have. Who hate what she represents. Then they'll have to go through both of us. Isaac's hand found Ember's, their marks blazing where they touched, gold and silver, Alpha King and Silver Moon, bound together the way they'd always been meant to be. Every single time. Ember looked at Kalen, at the wolf who'd murdered her mother and tried to murder her, and felt something that wasn't quite pity but close. The old ways are over. The age of hunting Silver Moon descendants, of enslaving Omegas, of believing power comes from cruelty, it ends tonight. She raised both hands, and silver light poured from her like a flood, filling the entire cavern, burning away every trace of dark magic that had festered there for decades. The eclipse mark on the floor turned to ash. The corrupted symbols on the walls cracked and fell away. And when the light finally faded, Ember collapsed into Isaac's arms, the power retreating back into her blood where it would sleep until it was needed again. But everyone in that cave knew the truth now. The Silver Moon bloodline hadn't died. It had been waiting. And it had finally come home. The coronation took place under the full moon, in the great courtyard where every wolf in the northern territories could bear witness. Ember stood on the dais in robes of silver and white, the mate mark on her arm visible for all to see, no longer something to hide but something to honor. Isaac placed the lunar crown on her head, a circlet of moonstone and silver that had waited 3 generations for a Silver Moon descendant to wear it. The moment the metal touched her skin, the crowd erupted. Not the polite applause of ceremony, but genuine roaring approval that shook the very stones of the pack house. Ember looked out at the sea of faces and found the ones that mattered. The kitchen workers from Shadowfrost, freed from Marga's cruelty and given positions of honor in the royal household. Old Finch, who'd cried when Ember had personally thanked him for his bravery. The hostages Kalen had used, all of them alive and whole. And at the front, in a bassinet carved from silverwood, Kale and Luna slept peacefully, the babies who'd saved her as much as she'd saved them. You're trembling, Isaac murmured beside her, taking her hand. I'm terrified, Ember admitted. A month ago I was scrubbing floors. Now I'm supposed to lead a kingdom. You already are. Isaac squeezed her fingers gently. You've been leading since the moment you refused to walk past dying babies in the snow. The celebration lasted until dawn, but eventually Ember retreated to her chambers. Chambers she still couldn't quite believe were hers, and found a leather satchel sitting on her desk. Inside was a letter, the paper yellowed with age, sealed with silver wax and marked with her mother's name. Ember's hands shook as she broke the seal. My darling Ember. If you're reading this, then you've survived. You've awakened. And you've become everything I always knew you could be. I'm sorry I couldn't stay. Sorry I had to make you believe you were nothing so the wolves hunting us would believe it too. Every day I left you at Shadowfrost, I died a little more, knowing you were suffering, knowing you thought I'd abandoned you. But you were never abandoned. You were protected. hidden among the forgotten so thoroughly that even the most determined hunters looked right past you. And now you're exactly where you need to be, strong enough to defend yourself, powerful enough to change the world, and compassionate enough to remember what it felt like to be invisible. Use that compassion, my daughter. Be the queen I could never be. Protect the Omegas, the servants, the wolves that others overlook. Make sure no child ever has to scrub floors until their hands bleed while believing they deserve nothing better. Your power was always there. I only hid it until you were ready. And judging by the fact that you're reading this, that Dawn was able to deliver it as I asked, you're more than ready. You're exactly what the Northern Territories needs. I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm so proud of who you've become. Your mother, Lyanna. Ember read the letter 3 times before she could see through her tears. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer where she kept the few precious things she owned. A hair ribbon from a servant who'd been kind once, a stone Cale had grabbed with his tiny fist, and now this. Proof that she'd been loved. That she'd mattered. That her mother's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. She walked to the window overlooking the pack grounds, where the moon painted everything silver. Somewhere down there, in the servant quarters, young Omegas were sleeping. Wolves who'd been told they were furniture, who believed the lie because everyone around them reinforced it. Not anymore. I vow, Ember said softly to the moon and her mother's memory and the kingdom spreading out below her, that no wolf in these territories will ever be invisible again. That every Omega, every servant, every forgotten soul will know they matter. That power doesn't come from cruelty, but from protecting those who can't protect themselves. The mark on her arm glowed in response, warm and steady. Behind her, the door opened quietly. Isaac entered, still wearing his ceremonial armor, and crossed to stand beside her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much has changed." Ember leaned into his warmth, and his arm came around her shoulders automatically. "A month ago, I didn't even own this body. Now I own a kingdom." "We own a kingdom," Isaac corrected gently. "Together. The way it was always meant to be." He paused. "What are you thinking about?" Ember looked out at the sleeping pack, at the world she was now responsible for protecting. "I'm thinking about all the invisible wolves out there. The ones still scrubbing floors, still believing they're nothing. And I'm thinking about how we're going to find every single one of them and prove them wrong." Isaac smiled, fierce and proud. "Then that's exactly what we'll do. Starting tomorrow." "Starting tomorrow," Ember agreed. But for tonight, for this one perfect moment, she let herself simply stand in the moonlight with the mate fate had chosen for her, wearing a crown she'd earned, protecting children who'd seen her worth before anyone else had. The invisible Omega was gone. Lunar Queen Ember had taken her place. And she was never looking back. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please subscribe to the channel for more werewolf romance tales, alpha kings, rejected mates, and powerful Omega stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Leave a comment below telling me from where you are listening and what kind of werewolf stories you'd like to see next. Your support means everything and helps me create more content like this. Thank you for reading, and I'll see you in the next.